of flowers that are called asters. So at this time of the year, when you're driving around or looking in your yard, or you'll see a lot of flowers that are like this, like little daisy-like flowers, because daisies are also in the aster family, that are growing all around here. And you'll also see a lot of yellow flowers growing along our roads, which are called goldenrods. So the goldenrods and the asters get their flowers late in the season. And that's why we see lots of them at this time of the year. And asters are very interesting because if you look at their little flowers, or if you look at a sunflower, they have the big long petals, which are called rays. And then they have like a little center that looks yellow. And that part of the flower is called a disc. And actually these flowers are many, many different individual flowers that make up what looks like a whole flower. So they're actually called a composite, which means many. So it's like many flowers in one flower. So that's really, really cool. And so the way that you try, because there's a lot of asters and goldenrods are actually kind of hard to identify because there's lots of them and you're like, oh my gosh, which one is this? But at least you know when you see a flower that looks like a daisy, you know you can start off and you can go and you can either get a book. There's lots and lots of books out there. Like I have this book called A Field Guide to Wildflowers. Maybe you can see this.
Yes. Yes.
And this is A Field Guide to Wildflowers of New England and North Central. So so you want to get a book that's about flowers that are in this area. And of course, the other most wonderful thing you can do to try to identify them is to go onto the internet and ask questions. But there's so many flowers, you need to know where to start. So these kind of books can help you because what they do is they say, okay, they ask you about the flowers. Are they white? What color are they? And you use this book to kind of go to the section of the book where it says there's white flowers. And then you can start to kind of look at the different features. So you identify them by looking at the flowers. You identify them by where they're growing, like they're in New England. There's other asters that grow in California. You don't want to know about them right now. You look at what their leaves look like. In this case, these leaves were kind of heart-shaped. Other kinds of asters have very narrow leaves. And so you look at all the different features and you can start to look at this book and look at pictures like, oh, here is you kind of know it's an aster. Here is one that's got a heart-shaped leaf. And you can look at that and you can narrow it down and figure out what kind of plant it is. And there's actually a whole field of study called botany, where you could actually go to school and study about plants, and they could teach you many different things about plants. But one part of studying botany is learning how to identify flowers, trees, shrubs, all the different kinds of plants that grow around. And there's different groupings of plants that are similar. They're called families of plants, like asters are a group or a family of plants. And you can start to learn all these different plants. And some of these plants are very rare. So there's people who study these plants. So that's how you identify them. And also the other thing I told you in the beginning is you can get an app on your phone, which there's many of them. The one I have is called Seek. And you can take a picture with your phone, and there's so much information out there, it can help you to identify the flower. But you always have to remember, it might not always be 100%, but it can help you. So how do these flowers help the earth? Well, flowers are really important for a lot of different kinds of wildlife. They have nectar in them and they have pollen in them. So they provide food for a whole bunch of different kinds of insects and butterflies and things like that. And right now there's a lot of concern. If you hear the word pollinator, the way that these flowers reproduce and then they produce fruit is you might have an insect who comes to this flower, it takes some pollen off one flower, and it takes it to another flower, and then that ends up creating a seed, and then you get new flowers. And it's really important that we keep our insects and our butterflies healthy, but because that's how we can keep having flowers in our environment. So these flowers are, they not only do they get the animals help the flowers by helping them to reproduce, but the flowers also produce food for animals, for these insects and these pollinators, so they come and get their food. So that's one way that they're very important. Another way that they're important is they have the structure of the vegetation. Like a lot of times when the flowers die in the winter, they'll have, their stems will be hollow when they're dead in the winter, and they'll actually provide homes for a lot of different insects through the winter. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, in general, like plants, if you look at your picture, those plants are growing on the side of a bank, and by having various types of plants, grasses and flowers and trees, they help keep the soil in place and from washing away. So plants have all kinds of different functions, and I'm sure you found a number of different things in your research already.